In the middle of my daughter's funeral, my 7-year-old grandson looked at me and said, "Grandma, Mommy's tummy is bigger." Then he lifted his mother's blouse on his own, and what I saw sent ache down my spine. I'm glad you're here. If you're watching this video, please like, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you're listening to my revenge story from. I want to know how far it has reached. I walked with heavy steps into St. Francis Church where the smell of white leaves was so strong it felt like it was trying to suffocate me. Today I was there to say goodbye to my only daughter, Anna. The painful whispers of neighbors' family and my little girl's friends echoed faintly like daggers straight to my heart. Everyone was stunned. No one understood why Anna had left so suddenly. I walked toward the oak casket placed in the middle of the church where Anna lay cold and still. A picture of my girl was right beside it with those clear eyes and a smile as radiant as the morning sun looking right at me. Beside him, Thomas, my 7-year-old grandson, pressed himself against me. His small hand gripped mine tightly, as if he was afraid that if he let go, he would lose me too. The white shirt he wore was huge on him, making his thin body seem even more fragile. His black hair, carefully combed to one side, was now a mess from burying his face in my hands, crying without comfort. Looking at him, I remembered Anna the way she would hold him to her chest and sing to him every night. "Grandma, where did Mommy go?" he asked me last night with red eyes, and I could only hug him tight because even I didn't know how to answer. When the priest began to pray, the entire church fell silent. Only the muffled sobs of the people could be heard mixed with the wind whistling through the stained glass windows. I leaned down to fix Thomas's shirt, wanting him to look neat for his mother's final goodbye. But in that moment, the boy suddenly mumbled with a clear voice that froze my blood. "Grandma, Mommy's tummy is big." I froze my throat dry, not understanding what he meant. Thomas let go of my hand and took a small step toward the casket. His little feet trembled on the cold stone floor. With the innocence of a child, he reached out his small hand and touched the white dress covering his mother's body, gently lifting the fabric. That gesture was like a sharp knife that cut through the solemn air of the church. A strange silence fell over the place. Some people in the front pews turned their expressions a mix of curiosity and fear. I was frozen stiff. Under the fabric, Anna's stomach was not flat as I thought. It was swollen in a strange, unnatural way, as if it were hiding something terrible. And then when the light from a nearby candle shone brighter, I saw it clearly. A massive bruised purple, like a dark storm, spread from her ribs down to cover her entire abdomen. That mark didn't look like it came from a fall. It was too severe, too deep, as if someone had used brutal force to cause it. My heart pounded wildly. The blood in my veins turned to ice. I wanted to scream to ask who had done this to my daughter, but my feet were nailed to the floor, unable to move. I couldn't even pull Thomas back when Marcus, my son-in-law, suddenly appeared from the pew in front. He grabbed Thomas roughly by the arm and through his teeth, trying not to make a scene in the church. He hissed, "Thomas, what are you doing?" "You don't play around at your mother's funeral." His eyes were hard, but I saw the panic hidden in his gaze, as if he was afraid something would be exposed. Thomas burst into desperate tears. His cry tore through the solemn atmosphere. "I wasn't playing." "I saw it, Grandma." The boys' crying made the whole church turn around, and some began to murmur, their eyes fixed on the casket. Marcus rushed to pick up his son, calming him and scolding him at the same time. He deliberately positioned his broad back in front of the casket as if he wanted to stop anyone else from looking. He hugged Thomas tightly, whispered something in his ear, but his eyes locked onto mine cold and full of warning. I just stood there, my trembling hand gripping the cold edge of the casket to keep from falling. A feeling of helplessness washed over me like a wave. Anna, my daughter, the one I had given birth to, the one I had raised now, lay here cold with wounds I couldn't understand. Marcus's words echoed in my head. She fell down the stairs. Head trauma. But those bruises told a completely different story, a story I didn't dare to face yet. The priest stopped his reading. His gaze fell on me with compassion as if wanting to ask if I was okay. I took a deep breath, held back the sob, tightening my throat, and nodded gently. The church bells began to ring again, deep and sad, hurrying the ceremony along. But in my mind, all sound faded away. Only the image of the terrible bruise on my daughter's stomach remained like an unanswered question burned into my memory. The scent of leaves seemed to cling to me, tangling in every breath, bringing back memories of my daughter like a flood. Now only pieces of the past were left for me to hold on to. Our little house in the Santiago neighborhood was never fancy, but it was always full of laughter. Every afternoon, Anna and I used to gather in the small kitchen. The aroma of fresh cornbread filled the whole house. Anna, my little girl, was always as radiant as the morning sun. She had clear eyes and a bright smile as if no sadness could ever touch her. I remember her running through the yard, her long black hair flowing, shouting with excitement as I pretended to chase her to do her homework. "Mom, I'll make better bread than you," she used to say, her hands full of corn dough and a mischievous smile. In those moments, I thought they would last forever. But everything changed when Anna met Marcus. He appeared at a mass in St. Francis Church, a tall, elegant man with sweet words. Anna was only 22, fresh out of trade school, working at a small tailor shop in town. Marcus, with his striking looks and promises of a better life, managed to win her over. "Mom, he says he'll give me a home, a real family," Anna told me once, her eyes shining with hope. I smiled, took her hand, and warned her to be careful. But deep down, something unsettled me. There was something in Marcus's eyes that I couldn't trust. Although he was polite, there was always a hint of coldness about him, as if he were hiding something. They married after a year of dating. The wedding was in the same St. Francis Church, where today I just said goodbye to Anna. Seeing her in her white dress, I cried with happiness, but also because I had a vague feeling that I was losing her. Marcus took Anna to live in an elegant mansion in downtown St. Louis, far from our working-class neighborhood. That house with its high walls and iron gate built an invisible barrier between us. I remember the first time I visited, the feeling of strangeness upon entering that place. Everything was too perfect, too cold, the gleaming marble floors, the paintings on the walls that I didn't even understand. Anna kept smiling, hugging me tightly. But in every gesture, I sensed my daughter's stiffness, her discomfort. Whenever I hinted at wanting to visit, Marcus always found a way to say no. "Mom, we're very busy. We have to see some business partners this weekend," he would say, his tone soft but icy. Another time he said, "Anna is a little tired. It's not a good time for visitors, Mom." I listened and my heart ached, but I didn't know what to do. There were days I would call, and Anna would still answer with that same cheerful voice. "Mom, I'm so happy. Don't worry about me. But I'm a mother." And I could hear the tremor in her voice as if she was trying to hide something. One time I couldn't hold back and asked her directly, "Anna, does Marcus treat you well?" She was silent for a moment, then let out a laugh. "Mom, you worry too much. He loves me very much." But that laugh I knew wasn't real. It was like a fragile veil hiding a pain Anna didn't want me to see. The only times I could see Anna were at major church celebrations. She was always with Marcus, standing by her side like a shadow. He would greet me, but only with cold, obligatory phrases. "How are you, Mom? If you need anything, let me know." I would just nod, pretending to be calm, but inside I was always filled with unease. Once I noticed Anna was wearing long sleeves despite the suffocating heat. When I asked, she forced a smile. "Mom, we have air conditioning at home. I feel cool." I wanted to ask more, but Marcus's sharp gaze like a knife forced me to be quiet. From time to time, I tried calling her at times when I thought Marcus wasn't home. Once Anna answered with a tiny voice, "Mom, I'm busy cleaning. I'll call you back later." But that call never came. I started to get scared that my daughter was living in a cage I couldn't get into. Ivan told my close friend, Mrs. Linda, that I was worried about Anna. She took my hand and said, "Margaret, you're a mother. You have to trust your instinct, but be careful not to push Anna further away." Her words left my soul heavy because I knew I had no proof, only a growing anxiety. 2 days ago, while E was sewing on the porch, the phone rang sharply like a bad omen. It was Marcus. His voice sounded agitated, but strangely without a hint of pain. "Mom." "Anna, she fell down the stairs. I took her to the hospital, but the doctor said she didn't make it. The blow to her head was too severe. The needle fell from my hands and rolled across the dirt floor. I don't remember if I screamed or just cried in silence. I felt like my whole world was collapsing. That night, I sat in front of the portrait of my husband, Stephen, who had passed away 10 years ago. I cried until I had no tears left, begging him to protect Anna, convinced it had just been a tragic accident. I told myself I had to be strong because I still had Thomas and he needed me more than ever. But now, after what I saw at the funeral, I know I was wrong. The bruises on Anna's stomach, Thomas's innocent words, the terrified look in Marcus's eyes. It was all like a sharp knife tearing away the last shred of faith I had left. That was no accident. There was a terrible secret hidden in that luxurious house where my daughter lived her final days. As the people in St. Francis Church began to leave, I remained motionless by the oak casket, my trembling hand stroking the cold satin fabric as if trying to hold on to Anna's last warmth. I turned my head, searching among the few who remained. "Mr. David?" I whispered, my voice as if it took all my strength to say his name. Mr. David Ramirez, the owner of the funeral home, an older man with a hard, tired face, was in a corner of the room arranging bouquets of white chrysanthemums on the altar. Hearing me, he looked up with a compassionate expression and approached slowly. "Mrs. Margaret," he said, his voice deep and cautious, "you should get some rest. Today has been too much for you." But I shook my head, grabbing his arm, my fingers squeezing so tightly I could feel the rough fabric under my hand. "Please, I want to see my daughter one more time before she's buried," I whispered with a firmness that surprised even me. Maybe it was no longer the voice of a broken mother, but of a woman determined not to let her daughter depart in the midst of a mystery. Mr. David hesitated, his eyes reflecting concern. "Mrs. Margaret, I'm afraid this will be very painful for you," he said, his tone muted like someone who has seen too many tragedies in 30 years of work. But I didn't move, my eyes fixed on his, as if telling him nothing could stop me now. He finally sighed, nodded, and signaled to 2 assistants nearby. They pushed the casket into a small room behind the church, where the air was suffocating with the smell of disinfectant and white flowers. I followed him each step, carrying the full weight of my grief. Under the yellowish light, the room seemed colder than ever. Mr. David stood by the casket, his hands trembling slightly. Ash removed the satin cloth covering Anna's face. My daughter lay there, her pale face still holding that sweetness, as if she were in a deep sleep. Her closed lips no longer showed the radiant smile from the photo outside. I reached out and touched Anna's cheek cold to the bone. And for a moment, I just wanted to hug her, shake her, beg her to tell me this was all just a nightmare. "Please let me see her stomach," I said, my voice trembling, almost pleading. Mr. David looked up for a moment, his eyes torn between doubt and compassion. "Are you sure, Mrs. Margaret?" he asked, his voice a thread, as if afraid of what he might uncover. I nodded, avoiding his gaze, because I knew if I hesitated for a second, I would lose the courage to face the truth. Carefully, Mr. David lifted the burial dress, each movement slow, as if he himself feared what he would find. Under the light, I saw it with brutal clarity. Anna's entire stomach was covered in bruises, black and purple marks, as if a storm had ravaged her body. That bruise wasn't just an injury. It was an accusation, a naked truth I couldn't avoid. I leaned closer, my heart pounding, and discovered something even more terrible. On her head, on Anna's face, there wasn't a single blow, not a scratch. No sign of a fall down the stairs, as Marcus had said. Everything was spinning in my mind, the world crumbling. If it wasn't a fall, what had taken my daughter's life? Mr. David stood beside, his brow furrowed, his eyes dull as if fighting an internal battle. "I know what you're thinking," he said, barely audible. "This doesn't look like an accident, Mrs. Margaret. I've been in this business for 30 years. An injury from such a strong, concentrated blow in one place. It's very unusual." His words were like a knife confirming my screaming suspicions. I gripped the metal edge of the table, my knuckles white, my throat tight, unable to speak. I wanted to scream, to throw the truth in Marcus's face, to ask him what he had done to my daughter, but my body remained motionless like a statue trapped by grief. The church bells rang deep and sad, signaling the time for the burial. I leaned down and gently kissed Anna's hair. The familiar lavender scent still lingered, making my heart ache with every throb. "Forgive me, my love," I whispered, as tears streamed down my cheeks and fell onto the white fabric. "I'm going to find out the truth for you." Mr. David carefully covered her, his gaze full of compassion, but I knew he couldn't help me any further. This was my fight, and I had to face it alone. Leaving the small room, the air in the church no longer felt so heavy, but my heart was the same. I glanced at Marcus standing at the end of the aisle, his tall figure silhouetted under the dim candlelight. He was staring at me, his eyes sharp as knives full of threat, as if warning me not to dig any deeper. In that instant, a chill ran down my spine. He turned away quickly, but not before I saw the panic in his eyes. In that moment, all my doubts ignited into certainty. Anna's death was not simple. Marcus knew something, and he was trying to hide it. 2 days after the funeral, I stood before the heavy iron gate of the mansion where Anna had lived. I entered the house that was a home for her, but for me it was a cold place full of dark secrets. Marcus had taken Thomas to his grandparents' house, perhaps to avoid facing me. The enormous house, with its flawless white walls and gleaming windows, seemed like a foreign castle without a hint of family warmth. I pushed the door, and the creak of the hinges sounded like a warning. The air inside was thick, filled with the smell of fresh paint and something cold, indescribable. I went straight to Anna's room, where she used to sleep, where she dreamed dreams that now only lived in my memories. The door was ajar. I pushed it gently, and immediately the scent of lavender, so hers, hit me. That scent, as tender as she was, still lingered on the white pillow, lonely on the bed. My heart clenched as if someone was squeezing it tightly. I stood motionless for a moment, my hand on the edge of the pillow, imagining Anna was still there smiling at me like when she was a child. "Mom, I want to sleep a little longer," she used to tell me in a sweet voice every Sunday morning. Now only silence weighed on my chest. I began to pack Anna's things, each dress, each blouse folded carefully and placed in cardboard boxes. Every piece of clothing brought a memory. The light blue dress I sewed for her when she turned 18. The red sweater she loved to wear on cold winter days. I worked in silence, trying to hold back the tears. But every time I touched one of her things, my soul twisted. My Anna, the sweet girl with a smile like the morning sun, was now only left to me in pieces. When I opened the oak drawer against the wall, my hand stopped. Hidden at the bottom, under a thin layer of dust, was a small wooden box, the kind girls used to keep precious memories. It was small with simple engravings, but it seemed to hide a world of secrets. I picked it up with trembling hands, my heart pounding as if I were about to touch something forbidden. I sat on the edge of the bed, placed it on my lap, and carefully lifted the lid. What I saw inside left me frozen. A prenatal appointment card from the St. Louis Obstetric and Gynecology Clinic, which clearly stated that Anna was 12 weeks pregnant, a packet of black and white ultrasound pictures showing the tiny silhouette of a life yet to be born, and several handwritten pages in a shaky script, some stained with tears. I read every page, every line from Anna, as if they were daggers straight to my heart. "He got angry again and hit me hard in the stomach," Anna wrote. "But I think when he finds out I'm pregnant, he'll change." Her words were full of hope, but also pain. On the next page, the handwriting was even shakier. "I don't dare tell Mom, I'm afraid she'll worry. I'll endure it for our family." And the last line, like a silent cry for help. "My stomach hurts so much, Mom. I just pray to God that my children are okay. As long as they're healthy, I still have hope." I read as tears fell onto the fragile papers. Anna, my daughter, had endured a suffering I had no idea about. She had kept it to herself so I wouldn't worry. I hugged the wooden box tightly as if I wanted to hug Anna, asking her for forgiveness for not seeing the signs, for leaving her alone in that darkness. In that instant, the sound of a key in the front door echoed sharply like a warning. I jumped quickly, gathered the scattered papers, put the wooden box in my purse, and felt my heart leap into my throat. Marcus came in smelling of cigarette smoke and a cheap perfume that wasn't Anna's. He stood in the doorway, barely raising an eyebrow when he saw me. "Still here, mother-in-law?" he asked, his voice monotonous but cold. He told you to let me handle this. His faint smile sent a shiver down my spine as if he was trying to hide something. I suppressed the rage burning inside me and forced my voice to sound calm. I want to pack my daughter's things myself, I replied dryly, not looking away from him. Marcus crossed his arms, clutched the box in my purse to my chest, avoiding his gaze, and walked past him quickly. When I left the house, it was already getting dark, the cold air seeping under my shawl. I could feel the box inside my purse as if it were burning, demanding I take action. My heart was pounding, not just from what I had discovered, but also from the certainty that Marcus was involved in Anna's death. He wasn't just a cruel husband. He was burning, demanding I take action. My heart was pounding, not just from what I had discovered, but also from the certainty that Marcus was involved in Anna's death. He wasn't just a cruel husband. He was someone hiding a crime. That night, back in my house in the Santiago neighborhood, I sat before my husband's altar, where Anna's picture now stood as well. I lit a candle, its light illuminating her sweet smile. I opened the box once more, reread Anna's words, and the tears started again. "Forgive me, my child," I whispered with a broken voice. "I didn't know how to protect you, but I promise I won't let your passing be forgotten." I knew that box not only held Anna's pain, but also the key to uncovering the whole truth. The next morning, I put on a gray sweater, wrapped my scarf tightly around my neck, and left the house carrying the old purse that held my daughter's secret. The St. Louis Gynecological Clinic was on a quiet corner with white walls and a brass plaque that shone in the sun. I went inside the air smelling of disinfectant and heard the soft, cheerful voices of nurses. But for me, everything was a blur. Only the prenatal appointment card remained in my hands, heavy as if it carried Anna's fate. My fingers were ice cold when I handed the card to the young receptionist. My daughter, Anna Rivers, was a patient here. I said my voice as if I had to gather all my strength to speak each word. "I want to see the doctor who treated her in the emergency room." The nurse looked at me with compassion, as if she could feel the pain crushing my chest. She nodded, then went into an office saying something over the intercom. I stood there clutching the handles of my purse as restless as if it were standing on hot coals. Several pregnant women were sitting in the waiting chairs. Their round bellies and eyes full of hope made my heart shrink. My Anna had been like them too, carrying a life inside her. She had dreamed of a happy family, but now she was just a memory. And my grandchild, whom I never got to meet, would never have the chance to be born. A short while later, an older man with graying hair came out from the hallway. He wore a white coat. His face was stern, but his eyes conveyed kindness. "I am Dr. Edward Herrera." He introduced himself with a deep, calm voice. "When he learned I was Anna's mother," he sighed, and his gaze grew heavier, as if he too carried a burden. "Please come into my office," he said, guiding me to a small room with shelves full of medical files and a simple wooden desk. I sat down, placed my purse on my lap, and continued to clutch the prenatal card as if I were afraid it would disappear. Dr. Herrera sat across from me, looking at a file on the table, thoughtful. "Mrs. Rivers," he began in a sad tone, "we did everything we could to save Anna, but when she got there, she had already lost too much blood. She suffered an internal hemorrhage in her abdomen. Her uterus was severely damaged, and the 3-month pregnancy could not be saved." His words were like a knife stabbing into my heart. I already knew Anna was pregnant from the card, but hearing it from the doctor made it more real, more devastating. I gripped the edge of the desk, my nails digging into the wood, struggling to keep my voice steady. "Was it from the fall down the stairs, doctor?" I asked, although deep down I already knew the answer. Dr. Herrera shook his head firmly, and his eyes hardened as if he also felt anger. "Not at all," he said with certainty. "Her body had no signs of head trauma or fractures, things you usually see in a fall like that. On the contrary, all the injuries were concentrated in her abdomen, caused by a very strong blow from the outside. I suspected it from the very beginning. The doctor's words were like a blast of icy wind piercing my mind and confirming what I feared. Marcus, my son-in-law, had lied. Anna hadn't fallen down the stairs. The terrible bruises I saw at the church were no accident. I felt the blood stop in my veins. My throat closed up and I couldn't speak. Dr. Herrera hesitated for a moment. Then he continued, his voice lower, as if afraid someone might overhear. We informed her husband, Marcus, but he just asked that we process the paperwork as quickly as possible, and he refused any request for further tests. A buzzing filled my ears. The pieces began to fit together in my head, forming a horrifying picture. Marcus not only knew the truth, but he was actively hiding it. He had insisted the hospital finish the paperwork immediately without allowing an autopsy, as if he feared something would come to light. I looked at Dr. Herrera, whose eyes showed compassion but also helplessness. "Why didn't you notify me?" I asked, my voice trembling, unable to hide the reproach. "Anna is my daughter. I had a right to know." He sighed, placed his hand on the folder, and looked down. "Anna asked us not to call you," he murmured. "Maybe she didn't want to worry you, but I think now you have the right to know the truth." His words were like another stab. Not just because of the truth about Anna's death, but because my daughter had tried to protect me. She had endured it alone so I wouldn't suffer. I lowered my head and my tears fell on the prenatal card in my hands, soaking the dates of Anna's appointments. "Thank you," I whispered with a broken voice. "Thank you for telling me, doctor." Herrera nodded with a look of someone who understands pain but can do no more. I stood up, clutched my purse tightly, and left the office. Outside, pregnant women were waiting in the room, chatting animatedly, their eyes full of hope. Seeing them, I felt a lump in my throat. My Anna had been like that too, dreaming of a happy family, excited about the child she would hold in her arms. But all of that was taken from her, not only from her, but also from my grandchild, whom I never got to meet. A few days passed. I went to the Central Market in St. Louis to buy a bouquet of white chrysanthemums, Anna's favorite flowers, to place next to her portrait, hoping their scent would ease my pain a little. The market was crowded that day. The voices of vendors and shoppers mingled with the smell of ripe fruit and fresh tamales. I walked slowly, clutching the basket of flowers to my chest, my heart heavy. Each white chrysanthemum reminded me of Anna, of the days when she was a little girl running through the fields near our house. Flowers in her hand, laughing out loud, "Mom, I want to put these on Dad's altar." Now I was buying them for her own altar, and that thought tore me apart inside. I passed by the stalls, trying to focus on choosing flowers, but my mind kept returning to Marcus, to what he had done to my daughter. As I passed the Paradise Cafe, an elegant place with large windows and shiny wooden furniture, I happened to look up and the scene froze me. Marcus was there by the window, the sunlight illuminating his face, showing a smile I hadn't seen on him since Anna's death. Across from him sat a young woman with blonde hair, red lips, and a radiant smile. They were sitting very close, shoulder to shoulder, like a couple lost in happiness. I quickly hid behind a row of flower pots, my heart pounding and my fingers gripping the basket handle so tightly my hands hurt. I recognized her immediately, Veronica Chavez, Marcus's private secretary. I had seen her once at his company's endo-fear party 2 years ago. Anna was with Marcus then, in a light green dress, trying to smile, though her expression was forced. Veronica appeared looking stunning in a tight dress, her gaze sharp, and I remember feeling uneasy when she shook my hand. Her smile was too perfect, like a mask. Now, seeing her sitting next to Marcus, I understood that my feeling from back then was not wrong. Marcus put his hand on Veronica's shoulder, leaned close to her ear, and whispered something that made her giggle. Her clear voice carried through the window frame. She took his hand casually, their fingers with shiny rings intertwined, as if they knew these gestures of affection all too well. I stood there behind the row of flower pots, feeling my blood boil. My daughter had been dead for less than 40 days. Not enough time had passed for the dirt on her grave to dry. And yet Marcus was sitting here laughing happily with his mistress, as if Anna had never existed. Anger made me tremble. The basket of flowers in my hands tilted, and a few white daisies fell and scattered on the sidewalk, crushed under the careless steps of passers-by. I wanted to rush in to scream at Marcus, to ask him why he betrayed Anna, why he treated my little girl like that. But I held back. I stood motionless in the shade of the trees, breathing with difficulty. I had to stay calm, think clearly. If I acted now, I would have nothing but rage, and Marcus would easily deny it. I needed proof, more time to unmask him. But seeing him and Veronica, it felt like 1,000 needles were piercing my chest. My Anna, the sweet girl who gave everything for her family, who was pregnant with his child, who endured beatings I didn't even know about. And now the traitor was enjoying happiness as if nothing had happened. They stood up. Marcus took out his wallet to pay his movements quick and confident. Veronica linked her arm through his and they left the cafe. Her smile shone in the sun. I turned my face away quickly, pretending to look at the flower basket, but the strong scent of Veronica's perfume hit me full on like a provocation. They got into a shiny black car together. Marcus sat in the driver's seat and Veronica in the passenger seat, still laughing and talking, her eyes gleaming. When the car started and disappeared around the corner, I stood there, my heart shattered. The white daisies lay scattered at my feet, torn to shreds like my heart was now. I bent down slowly, picking up each crushed flower with trembling hands. Each flower was like a piece of a memory of Anna, of the days she would run home with a bouquet of white daisies, of her pure smile. Now I was picking them up not to put on her altar, but to keep something of my daughter to remind myself that I cannot let Anna go without justice. In me head, a cold, clear idea began to form. Marcus not only mistreated Anna, he betrayed her. He also betrayed the family she worked so hard to maintain. And Veronica, she is not innocent. They will have to pay. I swear it. The next morning, I woke up with an iron will. Today I would confront Veronica, not Tovent, but to get the truth from her own mouth. I put on a gray sweater, threw a scarf around my neck, and left my little house in the Santiago neighborhood, my heart heavy, but resolute. Marcus's construction company was in downtown St. Louis, a building of gleaming glass with bright signs. I didn't go in. I chose a small coffee shop across the street where there was a corner discreet enough to watch without drawing attention. I ordered a black coffee, sat by the window, and didn't take my eyes off the company's main entrance. Every minute passed like a century, my heart pounding a mix of pain and rage. I thought of Anna, of the shaky lines in her diary of the grandchild who was never born. Anna, my love, I whispered to myself. I will make them pay. Around 5 in the afternoon, Veronica left the building. She wore an intense red dress tight to her body, and her heels clicked on the sidewalk. Every step exuded an arrogant confidence. Her loose blonde hair shone in the late afternoon light. Seeing her, I felt the blood rush to my head. My daughter had been buried for less than a month, and she, the one who helped destroy Anna's happiness, walked as if she had no shame. I got up, paid for my coffee, and followed her silently, keeping just enough distance not to be discovered. Veronica went to a small cafe near Tangamanga Park with rustic wooden tables and a warm yellow light. She sat at a corner table, ordered an orange juice, and started scrolling through her phone, a faint smile on her lips. I took a deep breath, gripped my purse handle, and walked straight toward her. Without hesitation, I pulled out the chair and sat down across from her. I dropped my purse on the table with a thud that startled her and made her look up. "Mrs. Margaret," she exclaimed, frowning, a flash of panic in her eyes that quickly returned to a look of disdain. "What are you doing here?" I didn't answer. I silently opened my purse and took out the photos I had taken the day before at the Paradise Cafe. I laid them on the table slowly like face-up cards. Marcus and Veronica holding hands, him whispering in her ear, their smiles shining as if the whole world was theirs. "My daughter has been 6 feet under for less than a month," I said through gritted teeth, each word like a stab. "And you are enjoying this?" Veronica's face turned pale. She pressed her red lips together but tried to stay calm. "This is none of your business," she said, her voice trembling but trying to sound firm. Anna fell down the stairs. "Everyone knows that." Her words added fuel to the fire inside me. I leaned forward and pulled the pages of Anna's diary from my purse. I dropped them on the table with a thud. "Really?" I said harshly, staring at her. "Anna wrote everything here. She was pregnant, carrying Marcus's child, and he treated her badly. He hurt her while she tried to protect her family." Veronica looked down. Her gaze wavered at the sight of Anna's shaky handwriting. Her hands trembled, and the glass of juice on the table vibrated slightly. She stammered. You don't understand. But her arrogance was gone. I didn't let her speak further. I leaned closer, lowered my voice, and whispered each word sharp as a knife. The police will get involved soon, Veronica. And do you think Marcus will protect you? Or do you think he'll pin all the blame on you to save himself? My psychological tactic worked. Veronica's beautiful face went pale. Hiri's widened, filled with panic. She looked down, gripping the edge of the table, her knuckles white. That night, she murmured, her voice trembling on the verge of breaking. Anna came home earlier than expected. She found us. She screamed. She cried. She said I had destroyed her family. Marcus went crazy. He hit her very hard in the stomach. I tried to step in, but it all happened too fast. I really didn't think things would go that far. Veronica's confession was like a hammer blow to my chest. I had suspected I had prepared myself, but hearing it from her own mouth made the pain as sharp as if it were new. I clenched my hands on the table, my nails digging into my palms, trying not to scream. Anna, my daughter, had been betrayed in her own home. And then, in a fit of rage, Marcus had taken my daughter's life and the life of the grandchild who was never even born. I looked at Veronica. She sat there trembling, her face drained of all color. You helped him, I said, my voice as cold as ice. You let my daughter die in pain. Veronica looked up, tears streaming down her cheeks, but I no longer felt any compassion. I didn't want that, she sobbed. I didn't know it would go so far. I didn't let her speak anymore. I gathered the photos and diary pages, put them carefully back in my purse, and stood up. You and Marcus won't get away with this, I thought with a determination that burned inside me. I will make you both pay for what you did to my daughter. I turned and walked out of the cafe, leaving Veronica sitting there stunned, her shoulders shaking. Veronica's confession echoed in my head like a flame that wouldn't go out, pushing me to act. I knew that just trusting the law wouldn't be enough to make Marcus pay. He had not only taken the lives of Anna and my unborn grandchild, but he was also living happily with his mistress as if my daughter had never existed. I wanted him to taste remorse, to live in fear, to feel Anna's presence in every breath, in every moment of his life. Every morning I woke up early and went to the Central Market in St. Louis, while it was still misty. I chose bouquets of immaculate white chrysanthemums, Anna's favorite flower, from the old vendor on the corner. Mrs. Margaret bringing chrysanthemums again today? The woman asked with a kind but curious look. I just nodded, saying nothing, my heart heavy. These flowers weren't for Anna's altar, but a message for Marcus. I asked a boy from the market to take the bouquet to his office and leave it right in front of his door. I imagined Marcus's face seeing the white chrysanthemums, a reminder of Anna's smile of what he had destroyed. Just leave it there. No need to say who'sn't it, I told the boy, giving him a tip, my voice cold, but a whirlwind raging inside me. At night, when the Santiago neighborhood fell silent, I would sit in my small room by the dim light of a candle next to Anna's photo. I took the ultrasound picture from the wooden box, looked at the small shape of the grandchild I could never hold. My hands trembled as I took a pen and wrote on the photo in a shaky hand, "Give me back my child, Marcus." Every stroke was a dagger I wanted to carve into his mind. I walked silently to Marcus's mansion under the dim moonlight and slipped the photo into his mailbox. I stood there for a while looking at the cold house, imagining Marcus opening the mailbox at dawn, his face pale seeing that sentence. I wanted him to feel that Anna was watching him, that he couldn't escape the ghost of his guilt. It wasn't long before my actions started to have an effect. One morning, going to the market to buy vegetables, I heard Marcus's neighbor whispering with the fish vendor. That Marcus is acting strange. Lately, he's up all night pacing on the porch chain smoking. One time we heard him muttering to himself. I stood there pretending to pick a bunch of cilantro, but inside I couldn't help but shudder. He was scared. He was tormented, just as I wanted. Another vendor joined the conversation. Yesterday I saw him sitting on his doorstep, a bottle in his hand, his eyes red, repeating, "No, it wasn't my fault." Like he was possessed. Their words brought me both satisfaction and pain. Satisfaction because Marcus was paying, but pain because I knew that even if he broke down, my Anna wouldn't come back. But I wanted to go further. Flowers and ultrasounds weren't enough. I wanted Marcus to live in torment, to hear Anna's voice in every dark corner. I remembered the lullaby Anna used to sing to Thomas every night. "Sleep, my love," with a soft melody like a caress. A bold idea flashed in my mind. I looked for Mr. John, a well-known electrician in the neighborhood who had fixed my lights years ago. "Mr. John," I said in a low but determined voice, "I need your help with something, but don't ask why." He looked at me curious but didn't refuse. I took him to Marcus's mansion one afternoon when he and Thomas were out. "There's an old radio in the garage of this house," I said. "I want it to turn on at midnight and play the song 'Sleep, My Love.'" Mr. John frowned clearly, not understanding my intention, but he nodded. "All right, Mrs. Margaret, are you sure this isn't normal?" I just nodded, my gaze firm. "I know what I'm doing." That night, Mr. John snuck into the garage and set the old radio to turn on by itself at midnight, repeating Anna's lullaby. I stood outside the gate, watching him work through a crack, my heart pounding with anxiety and fear. But I knew I had to do it for Anna, for the truth. The next day at the market, I heard news that chilled my soul. The vegetable vendor said that Marcus had smashed the radio in a panic attack in the middle of the night. He ran out of the house, pale with a hammer in his hand. "He started smashing the radio like it was a demon," she said, amazed. "The neighbors heard him. They all say he seems possessed." I bowed my head, pretending to choose a head of lettuce, but inside I knew he was on the verge of a breakdown, and I would be the one to push him over the edge. After the days I spent tormenting Marcus, I felt it was time to bring everything to light. I knew that only justice could partially soothe my shattered heart. I gathered everything I had. Anna's small wooden box, the prenatal appointment card with the cold notes confirming her 12-week pregnancy, the tear-oaked pages of her diary that told of my daughter's pain, the ultrasound pictures of my unborn grandchild, and most importantly, the recording of Veronica's confession that I had secretly obtained at the cafe near Tangamanga Park. This evidence was Anna's final voice, and I would use it to ensure that the person who took my daughter's life could not escape. I walked into the St. Louis police station one gray morning, my old heavy purse slung over my shoulder as if I were also carrying Anna's fate. I asked to see Commander Hector Luna, directly the station chief, a man known for being strict but fair. The receptionist looked at me with some pity, perhaps seeing mired eyes and tired appearance. "Wait a moment. I'll let him know," she said softly. I sat in the waiting room, clutching my purse strap, as restless as if I were on hot coals. With every minute that passed, I thought of Anna, her sweet smile, and the lines in her diary. "My tummy hurts, Mom." I clenched my hand tighter and told myself that today the final battle for my daughter's justice would begin. Commander Hector Luna appeared, a middle-aged man with a hardened face and sharp eyes. He invited me into his office and pointed to the chair in front of his desk. "Mrs. Rivers, what brings you here?" I opened my purse and placed each item on the table: the wooden box, the pregnancy book, the diary pages, the ultrasound photos, and finally the phone with the recording. "My daughter Anna Rivers did not die from a fall down the stairs," I said, my voice trembling but full of determination. "This is what I have found, and I want the person who took her life to pay for it." Mr. Luna frowned, examining the items with absolute concentration. When I played the recording, Veronica's trembling voice filled the room, recounting the fateful night Anna surprised her and Marcus, and how Marcus lost control and cruelly attacked my daughter. Mr. Luna's face hardened, his gaze as cold as a blade. "This is enough to open a criminal investigation, ma'am," he said, his voice deep but firm. "But you must be prepared for a long road. Cases like this are not easy." I looked at him unwavering. "I'm prepared," I replied, my voice resolute, "as long as justice is served for my daughter." The next day, I was notified that the police had raided Marcus's office just as he was leaving. I wasn't there, but I imagined the scene. Marcus, in his impeccable suit and satisfied smile, suddenly panicking as he was surrounded by officers handcuffed in front of his stunned colleagues. "I'm innocent. You're making a mistake. I heard," he screamed, trying to resist, but his voice was choked with panic. What broke my heart was knowing that Thomas, my little grandson, saw his father being arrested. The boy screamed, hugging the teddy bear Anna had sewn for him, desperately calling for his dad. I wanted to run and hold him to tell him everything would be okay, but I knew it was better for him to suffer once than to live a lifetime deceived by a father like Marcus. The preliminary hearing was held a few weeks later. I wore a simple black suit and sat in the front row, my hand clutching the daisy-embroidered handkerchief Anna had given me. The air in the courtroom was thick. The smell of old wood and the murmurs of the crowd were suffocating. The prosecutor, a young woman with a sharp gaze, presented the evidence one by one, the pregnancy book, Anna's diary, pages, the ultrasound photos, and the recording of Veronica's confession. Each item shown was like a dagger, not just against Marcus, but against my own heart. I listened again to Veronica's trembling voice, recounting the night Anna died, and I had to grip the handkerchief tightly to keep from breaking down. Veronica was also called as a witness. She entered without the arrogant air she had at the cafe. Her blonde hair was tied back, her face pale, her eyes cast down under the pressure of the judge's and prosecutor's gaze. When questioned, she, trembling, admitted everything, her voice barely audible. I was there. Marcus went crazy when Anna found us. I couldn't stop him. Those words sent murmurs through the courtroom. But forma, they were just confirmation of what I already knew. Marcus, standing in the defendant's box, shouted, "She's lying. It's all a lie. I didn't do anything." He tried to pin all the blame on Veronica, his voice breaking. But his terrified eyes betrayed him. I looked at him coldly, feeling not a shred of compassion for the man who had betrayed and taken my daughter's life. When the judge ordered Marcus to be held in custody pending further investigation for homicide and domestic violence, he collapsed, gripping the bars with both hands, his face as white as paper. The sound of the gavel echoed cold and firm like a final end to the days of lies he'd lived. I took a deep breath, feeling my chest lighten a little, though the pain was still there, latent and eternal. Justice may come late, but in the end, the truth came out. I stood up and left the courtroom, my hand still clutching the daisy-embroidered handkerchief as if I were carrying Anna with me. "I'm doing this for you, Anna," I whispered, tears streaming down my cheeks. "I won't stop until it's all over." The preliminary hearing was over. Marcus was in custody, but my heart remained heavy. I knew this journey wasn't over, not for me, but for other women who might be living what Anna had gone through. With that thought, I took a bouquet of white daisies, Anna's favorite flowers, and returned to the St. Louis cemetery where my little girl rested. The cemetery was quiet under the evening light, only a gentle wind weaving through the rows of headstones. I knelt before Anna's grave. I placed the bouquet of daisies on the cold stone and ran my hand over the letters of her name. "Anna, my love," I whispered with a broken voice. "It's over. The evil one will pay his price. Rest in peace." Tears rolled down my cheeks, soaking the earth and mixing with the falling petals. I stayed there, remembering Anna's smile, the days we made tamales together in our little kitchen in the Santiago neighborhood. The way she would hug me and say, "Mom, you're the strongest woman I know." Now I only wished I had been stronger, had recognized the signs had saved my little girl from Marcus's darkness. But I couldn't let the grief consume me. Anna had endured in silence to protect me, and I couldn't let her sacrifice be in vain. The next morning, I went to the Office of Brave Women, a nonprofit organization in St. Louis that supports victims of domestic violence. The office was in a small building with light blue walls and posters encouraging women to stand up and defend themselves. I walked in, clutching my purse to my chest, Anna's wooden box inside, my heart filled with determination, but also nerves. I had never thought of doing something big, but I knew this was the way to keep living, to keep Anna alive in my actions. Mrs. Teresa, the director of the organization, was a middle-aged woman with a kind but firm gaze. She invited me to sit in a wooden chair inside a small office where many thank you letters from women who had received help from the organization hung on the wall. "Mrs. Rivers, what brings you here?" she asked, her voice warm but very serious. I took a deep breath and began to tell my story from the day Anna died, the terrible purple mark on her stomach to the diary pages, Veronica's confession, and the trial that had just ended. I couldn't hold back the tears when I spoke of Anna, of my grandchild, who was never born, and the guilt of not having protected my daughter. I couldn't save my daughter, I said, my voice trembling, clutching the wooden box on my lap. But I want to dedicate the rest of my life to helping other women avoid this tragedy. Mrs. Teresa listened, and her gaze grew heavier, but she immediately took my hand firmly, her warm hand giving me strength. "Our doors will always be open for you here, Mrs. Margaret," she said firmly. "Your story and Anna's will be our inspiration, and I'm sure it will give hope to many people." From that moment on, I started volunteering at Brave Women. I handed out flyers at the Central Market, where the vendors looked at me with curiosity, but also with respect. "Mrs. Margaret, you are truly strong," a flower vendor told me as I gave her a flyer explaining how to recognize the signs of domestic violence. I just smiled, but inside I knew I wasn't as strong as they thought. I was just doing what Anna would have wanted me to do. In the afternoons, I went to the shelter's kitchen, prepared pots of hot soup, cut cornbread, and talked with women trying to escape their own hells. Every story I heard, every tear that fell reminded me of Anna, but also strengthened my resolve. Most importantly, I spent hours listening to these women. Some told of beatings from their husbands. Others whispered their fear of being abandoned if they dared to speak up. I hugged them, held their hands, and told them they were not alone. I lost my daughter because I didn't recognize the signs. I once told a young woman whose eyes were swollen from crying over her abusive husband, "But you still have a chance. Don't stay silent like my daughter did." Those words weren't just advice. They were a reminder to me that I had to keep going so no one else would suffer what Anna suffered. Occasionally returning to my empty house in the Santiago neighborhood, I would light a candle in front of Anna's portrait. The flickering light illuminated her sweet smile as if she were looking at me, as if she were thanking me. "Anna, do you see this?" I would whisper, tears running down my cheeks. "I'm protecting other women in your place. I couldn't save you, but I won't let anyone else go in silence. I would stay there under the dim candlelight, feeling a strange peace. The pain was still there, but now it was transformed into a greater purpose. I was no longer just a mother who had lost her daughter. I was a woman who fought for Anna, for Thomas, and for all those who needed to be heard. Every time I leave the shelter, I bring a bouquet of white daisies and place them on Anna's grave. I kneel, stroke the headstone, and say, "My child mom will keep going. I promise you." A soft breeze passes, carrying the scent of the flowers as if Anna is answering me. And in that moment, I knew that even though she is no longer here, Anna's spirit is still with me in every step, in every action, and in every word I speak to protect others. From everything I have lived through, I want to send you a message. Never stay silent in the face of violence and injustice. Silence only makes the pain greater. Turns villains into powerful figures, and the innocent into victims. If you have a gut feeling, a strange sign, trust it. Act in time. Don't let things go too far like what happened to my daughter. Don't wait to lose something to realize the value of truth and the power of your voice. Because sometimes silence becomes an accomplice to the crime. The story you have just heard has had names and places changed to protect the identities of those involved. We don't tell it to judge, but in the hope that someone will listen and stop to reflect. How many mothers are suffering in silence inside their own homes? I truly wonder. If you were in my place, what would you do? Would you choose to be silent to keep the peace, or would you have the courage to face it all to reclaim your own voice? I want to know your opinion because every story can become a candle that lights someone else's path. God always blesses, and I am sure that courage will lead us to better days. For now, on the end screen, I will leave 2 of the most beloved stories from the Elderly Stories channel. I'm convinced they will surprise you. Thank you for staying with me until this moment.